My mother told me to leave in the middle of holiday lunch, not after an argument, not after a raised voice, just a calm sentence delivered between the passing of dishes, as if she were asking me to hand her the salt. "Caroline, sweetheart," Patricia Hayes said, her voice warm enough to pass for kindness. "You've leaned on this family long enough. I think it's time you went home." The table went quiet, but only for half a breath. Forks resumed. Someone laughed too quickly. The moment slid forward like nothing important had happened. This story is an original creation by the writing team of the Revenge Amber channel, inspired by the hidden corners of family life, and told with the purpose of fostering emotional connection and spreading understanding. I stayed seated, not because I was shocked, but because everyone else looked prepared. My father, Edward, kept his eyes on his plate. He adjusted his napkin as if the fabric required urgent attention. My older brother, Matthew, didn't look up from his phone. My younger brother, Logan, took a slow sip of tea and smiled faintly, the way people do when something inconvenient has finally been said out loud. "Excuse me," I said, quietly. Patricia's smile didn't fade. "You know what I mean. You've always been so independent. We don't want you feeling obligated anymore." Obligated. The word landed heavier than the command itself. I wasn't aware I was causing a problem. I said. Logan leaned back in his chair. "Mom's just saying you don't have to carry everything," he said, voice smooth. "You tend to overdo it." Matthew finally glanced up. "Let's not make this awkward," he added, already tired of the conversation. I looked from face to face, waiting for someone to interrupt, to ask what my mother meant, to say this was unnecessary. No one did. Patricia reached across the table and touched my hand. A practiced gesture. "Families help each other," she said, "but that doesn't mean one person holds everyone up." The irony almost made me laugh. Instead, I felt something click into place. Not anger, not heartbreak, just clarity. "So you want me to leave?" I said. Edward cleared his throat. "Your mother's just concerned," he murmured, without meeting my eyes. I stood. Slowly. The chair scraped against the floor, louder than it should have been. "All right," I said. "I'll head out." Patricia nodded, relieved. "That's best." As I picked up my coat, I noticed how easily the conversation shifted back to recipes and plans, how quickly I disappeared. If you're listening to this story and recognize that kind of silence, stay with me. Sometimes the most important moments are the quiet ones people pretend never happened. No one followed me to the door. I didn't rush to the car. I walked, steady and deliberate, because rushing would have looked like weakness, and staying would have looked like pleading. The door closed behind me with a sound that felt final, not loud, just complete. Inside, the house continued without me. I could hear voices rise again, careful and pleasant. Someone laughed. Someone mentioned dessert. The rhythm returned too easily. I paused on the porch long enough to understand something I hadn't allowed myself to see before. No one had been surprised, not even a little. Matthew's phone hadn't been a distraction. It had been an exit. Logan's smile hadn't been awkward. It had been relief. And my father's silence wasn't confusion. It was consent. Patricia's words replayed in my head. Not the sentence itself, but the confidence behind it. She hadn't tested the idea. She'd announced it. That meant the decision had already been made. I slid into my car and closed the door. My hands rested on the steering wheel, calm in a way that unsettled me. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. Something older than anger had taken over. Halfway down the driveway, my phone buzzed. "Mom didn't mean it the way it sounded," Matthew said when I answered. His voice carried the familiar tone of inconvenience. "You know how she gets when she thinks things are uneven." "Uneven?" I repeated. "She just wants balance," he said. "You always take things so personally." I ended the call without arguing. There was nothing left to explain. The phone buzzed again. This time it was Logan. "You didn't have to make it dramatic," he said. "Mom was trying to protect you." From what I said? He hesitated. From being taken advantage of. The words settled into me, sharp and precise. I thanked him for his concern and hung up. My father didn't call. As I drove back toward Atlanta, the truth formed quietly, without accusation. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a structure. One where my role was useful as long as it was invisible, generous as long as it was silent. By the time the city lights appeared ahead of me, I understood what the silence at the table had been saying all along. It wasn't waiting for me to speak. It was waiting for me to accept my place. I didn't accept it. I had built my life around being reliable. That was the word people used when they described me, usually with a small smile, as if reliability were a personality instead of a function. "You're the strong one," my mother used to say. "You don't crack under pressure." She said it often enough that I began to hear it as praise. When I moved to Atlanta in my early 30s, Patricia called every Sunday. The calls were never long, never emotional. They were practical. "Your father's electric bills spiked again," she would say. "Just for this month." Later, it was the water bill. Then the seasonal maintenance for the farmhouse. I added my name as a secondary payer because it was easier than listening to her sigh. Matthew's calls were different, always rushed, always framed as temporary. "I just need help covering the retainer," he said the first time. "Once this settles, I'll handle it." I covered it. When another invoice came, I asked if everything was all right. "It's complicated," he said. "You wouldn't understand the legal side." Logan never asked directly. He mentioned things casually, the way people mention the weather. "Private school tuition jumped again," he said once, shaking his head. "Kids deserve stability. I transferred a supplemental amount each month, never the full tuition, just enough to close the gap." He thanked me with a smile and never brought it up again. At family dinners, Patricia would pat my hand and say, "Caroline helps where she can." The phrasing mattered. Help was voluntary. Help could be withdrawn without consequence. Obligation sounded heavier. One Thanksgiving. I arrived late after a long drive. Patricia glanced at the clock and said, "We were worried you'd cancel again." "I've never canceled," I said. She waved it off. "You work so much. We never know where you stand." I stood right there, but I didn't say that. Edward stayed out of it, as he always did, when I tried to talk to him once. Really talk. He shifted uncomfortably. "Your mother handles those things," he said. "She knows what's best for the family." Best for the family never seemed to include asking how much I was carrying. I told myself it didn't matter. I was single. I didn't have children. I had room to help. That logic made sense until it became an expectation. One evening, after wiring another payment, I joked I should get a loyalty card. Patricia laughed lightly. "Don't be dramatic," she said. "Families take care of each other." That sentence followed me for years. It explained everything and nothing at once. I paid because it felt easier than resisting. I stayed because leaving felt like failure. Somewhere along the way, usefulness replaced belonging, and I didn't notice the trade. By the time I sat alone in my apartment, replaying the lunch at Red Oak Farmhouse, I understood the shape of the role I had been playing. Not daughter, not sister. Infrastructure. And infrastructure is only noticed when it stops working. I drove away from Red Oak Farmhouse without turning the radio on. Silence felt more honest than music. My phone stayed face down on the passenger seat, buzzing once, then going still. At the first stoplight, I exhaled and realized I had been holding my breath since the table. When I reached my apartment in Atlanta, I stood in the doorway longer than necessary, keys still in my hand. The quiet inside wasn't empty. It was orderly. Nothing waited for me. Nothing demanded an explanation. My phone rang as I set my coat down. Patricia's name lit the screen. I let it ring until it stopped. A message followed a minute later. I hope you understand this was for the best. For whose best? She didn't say. Edward texted next. One sentence. Your mother's upset. I stared at the words, then placed the phone back on the table. I didn't respond. I wasn't upset. That difference mattered more than anything I could have typed. Later that evening, Matthew sent a short message. This didn't have to get weird. I didn't answer that either. It hadn't gotten weird. It had gotten clear. I made dinner for one and ate standing at the counter. No one commented on my portions. No one reminded me of tradition. No one asked what I planned to do next. Before bed, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and looked away instinctively, as if I might see myself begging to be let back in. The instinct passed. I looked again. I didn't see someone abandoned. I saw someone unassigned. I set my alarm for the morning, placed my phone on the dresser, and turned off the light. The room stayed quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't wait for permission. I opened my laptop because I needed something solid to hold on to. Feelings had carried me as far as they could. Numbers, at least, stayed where you put them. The ledger wasn't dramatic. No red warnings. No sudden spikes. Just a steady record of years spent smoothing things over. My parents' utilities appeared first. Supplemental payments. Added during months when costs climbed. I had told myself it was temporary every time. Temporary had stretched into routine. Next came Matthew's legal expenses. Not one crisis, but several. Each one framed as the last. Each one followed by a promise to settle up when things stabilized. I realized I had never asked what stabilization looked like to him. Logan's transfers followed. Smaller amounts, consistent, tuition gaps, extracurricular fees, seasonal increases. He never asked outright. He just mentioned the problem, then waited. I filled the silence. I scrolled slowly, my jaw tightening, not from anger, but from precision. The numbers weren't overwhelming on their own. What overwhelmed me was the pattern. I wasn't reacting to emergencies. I was underwriting a system. My phone buzzed. Logan's name appeared again. Mom says you're upset, he said when I answered. His voice was careful now. We don't want you doing anything you'll regret. I'm not upset. I said, I'm reviewing my accounts. A pause. Why? Because I should have done it sooner. That sounds serious, he said. You know the house relies on a lot of shared arrangements. Shared. Another word that disguised direction. I know exactly what relies on what. I said. Matthew texted while Logan was still talking. Let's not escalate this. I'm not escalating, I said into the phone. I'm organizing. Logan exhaled sharply. This is about Mom asking you to leave, isn't it? This is about me understanding my role. I said. I understand it now. He didn't reply right away. When he did, his tone had shifted. Family isn't transactional. I closed the ledger and rested my hands on the table. Then it shouldn't collapse when one person steps back. He hung up without saying goodbye. I reopened the ledger and began marking changes. Not rash, not angry, just deliberate. I removed myself as a secondary payer. I scheduled the end of automatic transfers. Each confirmation felt less like revenge and more like breath returning. When I shut the laptop, the room felt quieter than before. Not empty, accounted for. For the first time in years, my finances reflected my life instead of my fear. Nothing shut off overnight. That was never how it worked. What ended was certainty. The first message came from a service coordinator whose name I recognized but had never spoken to before. We're confirming the account holder change, she said on the phone. Future maintenance approvals will need to come directly from the primary owner. Understood, I said. My voice didn't shake. Later that afternoon, Patricia called. Did you remove yourself from the farmhouse accounts, she asked, skipping any greeting. I updated my role. I said, I'm no longer managing it. Her pause was measured. You've always handled those details. I won't anymore. This isn't the time to be making statements, she said. The house needs coordination. The house needs an owner. I said, and an agreement. She exhaled sharply, the sound of irritation slipping through politeness. You're punishing us. I'm stepping back, I said. There's a difference. Logan texted later that evening. The propane delivery was canceled. We have guests coming next weekend. I didn't cancel it. I replied. I stopped authorizing it. That's the same thing. He said. It isn't. I answered. It's what happens when responsibility returns to where it belongs. Matthew called near dinner. His voice sounded tight. Invoices are coming directly to me now. They should. I said. You told me you'd help. He said. I did. I said. I never said indefinitely. You're changing the rules. He said. No. I said. I'm finally following them. He hung up without arguing further. Over the next few days, small cracks appeared. Maintenance approvals delayed, service confirmations requested. Nothing dramatic, nothing public. Just enough friction to expose how much of the system I had been smoothing. Patricia sent a message late one night. Families don't abandon each other. I read it once, then set the phone down. I hadn't abandoned anyone. I had stopped standing in the doorway, holding everything open. And for the first time, the weight shifted. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, thick and formal. My name typed cleanly across the front. I recognized the firm before I opened it. Patricia had always preferred lawyers who sounded calm and expensive. I read it once, then again, slower. Emotional distress, misunderstanding, improper withdrawal of support, a request to restore access to Red Oak Farmhouse and resume prior arrangements. My phone rang before I finished the last page. This didn't have to go this far, Patricia said, her voice steady, practiced. We were forced into this. By whom I asked. You know exactly what you did, she said. You destabilized the household. I stepped away. I said, you escalated. There was a pause, brief but sharp. You've embarrassed us. That was the first honest thing she'd said. I warned you. I said, my attorney warned you. In writing, that clause was a technicality. She replied, you wouldn't actually use it against your own family. I didn't. I said, you did. She lowered her voice. This makes you look vindictive. It makes me look prepared. I said. She ended the call without another word. I forwarded the letter to my attorney. He called within the hour. They filed. He said, despite the notice, so they chose to contest. I said, yes. He replied, which means the reversion clause applies. When I asked, immediately, he said, ownership reverts to you as of the filing. I closed my eyes, not in relief, not in triumph, just to let the information settle. They'll be upset, he added gently. They already are. I said. Logan called that evening, anger no longer hidden. You're really doing this, he said. Over one lunch. This isn't about lunch, I said. You're taking the house. He said. Mom says you planned this. I planned to protect myself, I said. You planned to pressure me. Matthew sent a message instead of calling. Dad's not sleeping. He didn't know this would happen. He knew enough to stay quiet. I replied. Edward finally called the next morning. His voice was strained, unfamiliar. I didn't think she'd file, he said. I thought it would blow over. It couldn't. I said, not anymore. He sighed. Your mother says this is tearing the family apart. It was already torn. I said. I was just holding it together. He didn't argue. He didn't apologize. He just went silent again. By the end of the week, the choice they had made stood on record, not as a misunderstanding, not as emotion, as action. They hadn't lost control because I took it. They lost it because they assumed I wouldn't stop them. My attorney called early, his tone careful, as if the words themselves needed cushioning. "It's finalized," he said. The filing triggered the clause exactly as written. I leaned against the kitchen counter, steadying myself. "So it's done." "Yes," he said. "Red Oak Farmhouse is back in your name. Effective as of the filing date." I didn't say anything right away. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because the moment felt quieter than I expected. "They're going to react," he added. "I wanted you to hear it from me first. I appreciate that," I said. He paused. "You did everything by the book." After the call ended, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Patricia. "They told us," she said, skipping pretense. "You took the house." "I didn't take it," I said. It reverted. Her breath caught, just for a second. "You knew what this would do." "I knew what filing would do," I said. "You were warned. We were trying to fix things." She said. "You didn't give us time. You had years," I said. "You used them." Her voice sharpened. "That house belongs to this family." "I am this family," I said. She went quiet, then spoke again. Slower. "You're enjoying this." "I'm adjusting," I said. "There's a difference." Logan called next, his anger stripped of polish. "You blindsided us," he said. "That house is part of our history. It's part of my paperwork," I said. "Both can be true. You could have warned us." He said. "I did," I said. "In writing." He swore under his breath and hung up. Matthew didn't call. He sent a single message. "This changes everything." I stared at the screen, then typed back. It already had. That evening, Edward called again. His voice sounded tired. Older. "I never thought it would come to this," he said. "Neither did I." I said. "That's why I prepared." He exhaled slowly. "Your mother is very upset." "I know," I said. So was I. When the call ended, the apartment felt still, but not hollow. I opened the folder my attorney had sent and read the confirmation again, line by line. Ownership, responsibility, clarity. The house hadn't come back to me with a bang. It arrived the way truth often does. Quietly. Permanently. We met at a cafe just off the highway. Neutral ground chosen for visibility, not comfort. I arrived first and took a booth near the window. When they walked in together, I recognized the formation immediately. Patricia in front, chin lifted. Edward half a step behind her, Matthew trailing, pale and tight. Logan last, restless, already irritated by the delay. I didn't stand. Patricia slid into the seat across from me and folded her hands. "This has gone far enough," she said, her tone measured, reasonable. "You've made your point." "I didn't file anything," I said. "You did." Her mouth tightened. "We were forced." "No," I said. "You chose." Edward cleared his throat. "Let's all calm down." I opened the folder I had brought and placed it on the table. "I'm calm." Logan leaned forward. "You blindsided us. You pulled the rug out from under everyone." I stepped away. I said, "You tripped over the space I left." Matthew stared at the folder. "What is that, records?" I said. "Not totals. Timelines." I slid the first page across the table. Utility supplements. Seasonal maintenance approvals. Months and years listed in clean lines. Matthew's voice dropped. "You paid all of this?" "Yes," I said. Logan scoffed. "Families help each other, then help each other," I said. "Without me." Patricia pushed the papers back with 2 fingers. "This isn't about money. It never is," I said, "until it stops." Edward finally looked up. His eyes were wet, unfocused. "I didn't know you were covering all this. You never asked," I said. The words landed heavier than I expected. Matthew swallowed hard. Logan looked away. Patricia straightened. "You're punishing us." "I'm setting myself down," I said. "There's a difference." She shook her head. You always make yourself the victim. I made myself the solution, I said. For years. You just didn't notice because it was convenient. Logan slammed his hand lightly against the table. So what now? You just walk away. I reached into my bag and placed a single key on the table. The brass caught the light as it slid to a stop. That's the farmhouse, I said. It's mine again. Not because I wanted it back, because you challenged it. Edward stared at the key. You don't have to do this. I already did, I said. Patricia's voice softened, dangerously so. Caroline. Sweetheart, think about what you're losing. I met her eyes. I already did. I gathered my folder and stood. No one reached for me. No one followed. As I walked toward the door, Edward said my name. Not loudly, not firmly. The way habits speak when they don't know what else to do. I didn't turn around. Outside, the afternoon was brittle and bright. The bell above the cafe door rang once behind me, clean and final. For the first time in years, I felt the weight lift in a single, undeniable motion. That night, I slept without bracing for a phone call. The calls slowed after that, not all at once, but noticeably, like a room emptying without anyone announcing they were leaving. Patricia sent one final message a week later. You didn't have to make it permanent. I read it, then typed back. Neither did you. I didn't add anything else. Edward called once more, late in the evening. His voice was softer than I remembered. The house feels different, he said. It always did. I replied. He didn't argue. He didn't apologize. He said goodnight and hung up. A month later, I signed the paperwork to sell Red Oak Farmhouse. Quietly. No announcements. No family meeting. When my attorney confirmed it was complete, he said, You're free of it now. I know, I said. On Sundays. I stopped waiting for my phone to ring. I started cooking meals that took as long as they needed. Sometimes friends joined me. Sometimes they didn't. The silence no longer felt like something I had to earn. One afternoon, a coworker asked why I seemed lighter. I told her I had finally stopped paying for things I didn't use. She laughed, thinking I meant subscriptions. I didn't correct her. If you're listening to this and recognize pieces of yourself in mine, stay with the story a little longer. Sometimes walking away doesn't look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like peace settling in slowly. Then, all at once. The last time I checked my phone before bed, there were no missed calls. I set it face down and turned off the light. For years, I thought keeping my family together was my responsibility. What I took with me wasn't the house or the money or the proof. It was myself.